Hello, my name is Karly Sciortino-Poulter. I'm the Family Advocacy Programs Manager for the ARC of Indiana, and Down Syndrome Indiana has very kindly invited us to talk today about Medicaid waivers. If you're not familiar with the ARC, we're an advocacy organization for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We were established back in 1956 by families who wanted a better life for their kids, as easy as that sounds, and we've been working to make that better life for the last 60 years. Today, we are the leading advocacy organization for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We are committed to progressive legislation and public policy that protects the rights of people with disabilities and improves services for people with disabilities. We're home to the ARC Master Trust. We've helped found the Erskine Green Training Institute, and we're part of the ARC of the United States. Information today is provided thanks to funding and collaboration from Indiana's Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. So first of all, what is a Medicaid waiver? Because oftentimes when you have a child or a loved one with a disability, you're told to apply for a waiver, or sometimes you're told just to apply for Medicaid, but nobody ever bothers to explain what it is. So let's start there. So a Medicaid waiver are what Indiana calls their home and community-based services, and they allow individuals to access services and live as independently as possible in their own communities. Now, in order to receive a waiver, an individual must be eligible for an appropriate Medicaid health plan category. But here's the catch. When you have a waiver, family income isn't considered. When an individual is approved for the Medicaid waiver, Medicaid doesn't look at family income for eligibility. They only look at the income and the assets of the eligible individual. Now, one of the other things is if the individual, the person with the disability, has more than $2,000 in assets in their name, families should consider establishing a special needs trust, such as the ARC Master Trust, or an ABLE account in order to maintain eligibility. In Indiana, we have two different styles of waivers. We have waivers through the Division of Aging, and we have the Aged and Disabled waiver and the Traumatic Brain Injury waiver. Then we also have waivers through the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services, or the BEADS office for short. So if you've ever heard somebody talk about the BEADS office and you weren't sure who they were talking about, it's the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services. And there we have the Family Supports Waiver and the Community Integration and Habilitation, or CIH Waiver. Now, when it comes to those Division of Aging waivers, those are really designed for individuals who have high medical needs, and they're designed to help people with high medical needs stay in their homes and not go into a nursing home. That's the whole purpose of theirs, to provide enough supports so that they can continue to live in their own homes. Now, in order to qualify for that waiver, the individual must meet nursing facility level of care. With the Traumatic Brain Injury waiver, they must either meet nursing facility level of care or intermediate care facility for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities level of care. I know that's a mouthful, and that's not something that you really need to commit to memory, but just know that in order to qualify for a waiver, you have to either meet nursing facility level of care or ICF IDD level of care. And also, to qualify for the Traumatic Brain Injury waiver, the person must have a diagnosed traumatic brain injury. And the state has a very specific definition of that. So what the state considers a traumatic brain injury is when some external force has caused the brain injury. So if somebody, for example, contracted meningitis and it caused significant cognitive impairment, that's not a traumatic brain injury according to the state of Indiana. But if somebody were in a car accident, for example, or fell out of a tree, or something externally happened to cause that brain injury, that's what the state of Indiana considers a traumatic brain injury. Now, to apply for either of those waivers, you need to call your local area agency on aging. And if you're not sure who that is, you can call the state's 800 number at 1-800-986-3505. And if you're in the Indianapolis area, meaning Marion and the surrounding counties, that would be SEQOA. Now, The Division of Aging waivers, like I said, those are designed to help people stay in their homes and not go into nursing homes. The BEADS waivers are very, very different. Their purpose is to help people with developmental disabilities get out and be as active in the community as possible. Now, in order to qualify for a BEADS waiver, the individual needs to have an intellectual or a developmental disability. That includes Down syndrome, that includes autism, cerebral palsy, seizure disorders, chromosomal abnormalities, mitochondrial disorders, all sorts of different diagnoses. And then, but a diagnosis alone isn't enough. You also have to meet that certain level of care. So BEAD staff will determine initial eligibility based upon a level of care screening and a review of other documents like psychological evaluations, educational records, IEPs, and medical records. So, as I said, a person, in order to qualify for BEADS waiver, must have an intellectual or developmental disability or related condition prior to age 22. And that's one that's non-negotiable. The disability had to occur before age 22. And the condition must be expected to continue indefinitely. The other thing is that the individual must meet a Medicaid eligibility in a waiver-compatible category. Believe it or not, there are about 20 different categories of Medicaid. Not all of them are compatible with a waiver, but many of them are. So if someone is on, if a child, for example, is on Medicaid based on family finances, that's still a compatible form of Medicaid for the waiver. If a person is over the age of 18, they must be determined disabled by the Social Security Administration in order to have a compatible form of Medicaid. HIP 2.0, for example, is not a compatible form of Medicaid for the waiver. But not only does someone over the age of 18 need to have that disability determination from the Social Security Administration, but they also have to meet the income and the asset limits. And remember, family income and family assets are disregarded. So I keep talking about level of care. So what exactly does that mean? Well, for a BEADS waiver, someone must have substantial functional limitations in 3 out of 6 areas. And those 6 areas that they're looking at are mobility, understanding and use of language, self-care, learning, self-direction, and capacity for independent living. Now, nowadays, everybody is qualifying initially for the Family Supports Waiver. Now, that waiver has a maximum annual budget for services of $17,300 per year. Now, that's just the waiver services. That does not include any medical expenses that comes from Medicaid health insurance. Now, there is a waiting list for the Family Supports Waiver. Right now, and it's April of 2019, right now our waiting list is about 10 months. So it's a little bit of time, but it's nothing like it used to be. So there is a statewide waiting list that's maintained by BEADS. Now, I will also say that priority status is given to 18 to 24-year-olds who have finished school, because the state recognized that there were a lot of people, how difficult it was to go from being in school and having all sorts of supports and services to suddenly having nothing. And so the state created a priority category so that if someone is between the ages of 18 and 24 and they have finished school, either by getting a diploma or getting a certificate of completion, they can request priority status, at which point they get to go to the top of the waiting list. Another priority category has just passed by the state legislature, and it should go into effect July 1st of this year, and that is priority waiver slots for the dependents of active duty military and veterans. So if you are active duty and you have a child with a disability, you can get your child on a waiver here in Indiana very quickly now. And the reason for that is that most, especially active duty military members, are moving around so often that their children never actually get a chance to never get a chance to have any of the benefits that are available through Medicaid waiver services, because oftentimes in many states the waiting lists are so long. So Indiana created this priority category so that the children of active duty military members and veterans are able to start getting the services they need as quickly as possible. Now, here in Indiana, we also have the Community Integration and Habilitation, or CIH waiver. You don't really need to remember the full name because nobody ever calls it anything other than CIH. Now, that is more of an emergency-based waiver. In order to qualify for that waiver, first of all, the person must be eligible for a BEADS waiver, and they have to meet one of the emergency priority categories. Now, the biggest difference between the CIH waiver and the Family Supports waiver is that the budget for services is not capped at that $17,300 mark. The budget for services on a CIH waiver is determined based on the individual's needs, their age, their health condition, and their living situation. But as I said, this is more of an emergency-based waiver. And so the priority categories for this emergency waiver are loss or incapacity of a caregiver when no other caregiver is available, a caregiver over the age of 80 when no other caregiver is available, an extraordinary health and safety risk as reviewed and approved by the division director, aging out of a childhood placement by the Department of Education or the Department of Child Services. So for example, if a child was placed at, say, Damar or T.C. Harris by the Department of Education, and they are aging out, that can be a priority category for the CIH waiver. If someone were placed in a psychiatric residential treatment facility or Damar or T.C. Harris, or maybe they were a foster child and they are aging out of DCS services, that can also be a priority category for the CIH waiver. One of the other categories is leaving an institutional setting, such as a nursing facility, a state-operated facility, supervised group living, or intermediate care facilities for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So essentially, aging out of a nursing facility, a hospital, or a group home can be a priority category for the CIH waiver. And then finally, substantiated cases of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Now, as I said, BEAD services are really designed to help people with developmental disabilities get out and be as active in the community as possible. Those waiver services are designed to be person-centered, individualized, and to help self-advocates be an active, integrated part of the community, learn independent living skills, supplement their needs, and work toward the self-advocate's vision of a good life. So, one of the things that will happen when you have a family supports or a BEADS waiver is that you will create something called a person-centered individualized service plan. Think IEP without the drama. A BEADS person-centered individualized support plan guide describes this as a robust and thoughtful planning process which articulates the hopes, desires, and needs of the individual, describes their current life circumstance, and charts a path for the individualized support team to follow in supporting the individual to achieve their vision of a good life. And in order to do that, the Bureau of Developmental Disabilities has adopted something called the Life Course Framework. The core belief of the Life Course Framework is that all people, not all people with disabilities, but all people have the right to live, love, work, play, and pursue their life's aspirations in their community. So some of the guiding principles from the Life Course Framework that assist people to define what they want and also, just as importantly, what they don't want in life, to help determine an individual's strengths, to determine what resources they already have available regarding technology, community supports, relationships, and eligibility-specific options, to identify an individual's vision of a good life, and to determine the skills and resources needed to achieve that good life. But the nice thing is they have all sorts of tools that help with this, because when you just hear we want to help you achieve your vision of a good life, that can seem really daunting. That's really abstract and so open-ended that you're almost not sure where to start. Well, the good news is Life Course has actually adopted a lot of tools to help families figure out what they can do and what they may have access to. This particular tool is called the Exploring Life Possibilities chart. And so one of the things that Life Course does is it breaks things down into different life stages. So we have early childhood, we have school aged, we have transition to adulthood, and aging. And each one of those sections is tailor-made to meet the specific needs of individuals who are in each one of those life stages. But then they also break things down into different life domains. Here we have daily life and employment, community living, social and spirituality, healthy living, safety and security, citizenship and advocacy. Then we also have supports for the family unit and supports and services. And so what I like about this particular tool is that if you notice on the bottom, it talks about the things that we've traditionally done. When it comes to daily life and employment, for example, traditionally we've had either day programs or sheltered workshops. But what I like about this particular tool is it helps us think outside of the box and helps us think about new possibilities. So for example, now we're talking about things like micro enterprises, self-advocates owning their own businesses. And yes, that is absolutely possible. We're talking about careers, not just jobs. We're talking about college and tech schools. We're talking about supported employment. We're talking about volunteering, and we're talking about specialized college programs. So this tool just helps open your eyes to some of the possibilities that may be out there beyond what you may already be thinking about. Then we have the Integrated Support Options tool, and this is another one that I really like because with Life Course, they break things down into different categories. We've talked about the different life stages and the different life domains, but then they want to look at what types of resources do you already have available? What types of resources do you maybe still need in order to achieve that vision of a good life? And so they break things down into personal strengths, into relationship-based supports, technology, community resources, and then eligibility-specific supports. And I really do think that technology section is one that is easily overlooked. And I'll be honest, when I would think about technology, I would often think about things like communication devices and, some of the more formal, really involved technology, equipment that would read textbooks to students, those sensors that you can put under someone's mattress to detect seizure activities. Those are what I would typically think of when I thought about technology. It never occurred to me to think about the simple things that everybody has access to, like a calculator or an alarm clock or your cell phone or the calendar app on your cell phone. There are a lot of different things that are technology based that we all use in our own lives and we take for granted, and they make our lives easier, but they can be essential for somebody with a disability. So for example, having automatic refills on prescription medications for my family is something that's really convenient for me so that I don't have to remember to call the pharmacy to refill that prescription. But for a self-advocate, that one little thing of automatic refill can be a game changer because it's something that's convenient for me, but can be absolutely essential for a person with a disability. And so this tool helps give you some ideas on some of those different supports and different resources that you may already have available to you that you might not even be thinking about. And of course, they have this broken down by different life domains. And so this is a 2-page tool so that they can talk about the different resources in each life domain. Another tool that I really like is the Developing a Vision tool, because the whole idea behind Life Course is, what is your vision of a good life and how do we help you get there? But what I like in particular is that there are two different versions of this. There's a developing a vision tool for the family, but then there's also one for the individual. Because sometimes what the family views as a good life and what the individual views as a good life don't always match. And so sometimes that's really helpful in order to get everybody on the same page. These are also some tools that I've encouraged families to use and maybe take to them with their school system so that the school understands what your vision for your child is. This is another tool that I really like. It's the Life Trajectory Worksheet. The whole idea behind this is, what is your vision of a good life? And we start listing some of those things. And just as importantly, what do I not want in my life? Then you talk about, some of the past experiences you've had that have helped you work toward that good life, and what are some of the things you still need? And so this is something that can feel a little bit overwhelming. It's a big blank sheet of paper, but it's okay to start off small. So for example, if your child is still school aged, right now their vision of a good life may just be being able to go to GameStop, being able to go to the movies, or go to the park, or take part in Special Olympics. And then eventually we can build on that as time goes by. If your child's 7 years old, you're not really thinking about careers yet, and that's okay. But maybe part of that good life is learning how to clear the table after a meal, and take the dirty dishes to the sink. And then in a few years, maybe it's learning how to unload and maybe even reload the dishwasher. And so one of the great things about all of these tools is that they are here to grow with you. Part of that life course trajectory is a life course portfolio. And this is another tool that I like, because that very first section is, what do people like and admire about me? What is important to me? And how do you best support me? Because again, this is very strengths-based. This is about celebrating all the wonderful things that our loved ones can do, and recognizing how great they really are. And so that's the emphasis on this. So this is an integrated support star. And when we talked a couple of tools back about the different categories of personal strengths and assets, relationship-based supports, technology, community-based supports, and eligibility-specific supports, this is where all of that information goes. Basically to help you brainstorm what types of resources are out there, what types of resources do you already have available to you, and what do you still need to help you achieve your goals? Here's an example that they've done up for daily life. And one of the nice things is that you can find all of these tools at lifecoursetools.com. You can download all of them for free. You can watch videos, see examples. But I like the fact that they created some examples to help give families an idea of how some of these things work. So for example, when it comes to daily life, maybe you have somebody who has had some work or volunteer experience. Maybe they've already had a summer job. Maybe they have an idea of what they want to do for a job or a career. When we're talking about relationships, yes, that's going to absolutely be family and friends, but maybe that's also coworkers that they may have to help them with their daily life. Maybe that's going to be teachers or mentors. When we're talking about technology, again, it's things like, that alarm clock and that cell phone that's so easy to take for granted, but can really make a huge difference in the life of a person with a disability. So for example, if somebody's trying to learn how to navigate public transportation, you can actually shoot a video on your phone of the bus route so that they can see which bus number they get on. They can follow along with the landmarks to make sure that they're on the right bus. Here's a more robust life trajectory worksheet, and this one is specifically for respite. And the reason I put this in here is that there are a lot of parents when they are applying for the waiver, or when their loved one gets the waiver, the one thing that they're looking for is respite. Sometimes I think that's because that's the only service they've ever heard of. But respite is where someone spends time with your loved one so that you can have a break. But one of the things we should also look at is what is your vision for good respite? What does that provide for the caregiver? What does that provide for the care recipient? And is paid respite services even something that your loved one needs, or have they gotten to the point where maybe they don't need paid respite, or maybe they only need paid respite when it's for a longer period of time? So, for example, think about what's going on in my life, and what would taking short breaks help me and the person I provide care for? How would it help them? When making those short breaks happen, what would I do as a caregiver? What would I do if I had a break from caregiving? And what would I spend time doing? What would I spend time with, or who would I spend time with during a break from caregiving? So again, just trying to help you think about, is paid caregiving something that you need, or is it something that maybe you can use those waiver dollars in other areas? Here they've got an integrated support star example just for respite options. But there are about 30 different services available under the waiver beyond just respite. And here are some of the really common ones. First of all, there's case management, and that is the one service that is required. A case manager is the person who is going to guide you through this process. They're the one who does all the paperwork for the state when it comes to your waiver. They are the ones who are somewhat being a watchdog over this to make sure that if somebody is supposed to be getting services, that they're actually getting those services and getting them appropriately. Then there's extended employment services. So let's say somebody's been working with vocational rehabilitation and they've gotten a job and their VR case is about to close, but they still need somebody to kind of come in and check on them once a week or once every couple weeks. The waiver can actually pay for that. There's something called Participant Assistance and Care, or PAC services. That's an extra set of hands to help out however you need it in regards to your loved one with disabilities. There's something called community habilitation, which quite frankly is the broadest service out there because it's anything you do in the community. So that can be somebody taking your loved one to the park. That can be taking them to the grocery store and teaching them how to grocery shop. That can be somebody taking them to and from Special Olympics so you don't have to. One of the other things that we see occurring is agencies creating small groups of individuals who have similar interests, and they are going out in the community and doing all sorts of different things, whether it's volunteering in the community to help work on job skills, whether it's going out to dinner, whether it's, playing games to help work on social skills. That's something else that can be done through community habilitation. Then we also have behavior management. And that doesn't mean bad behaviors. That means learning new ways to do things. For example, learning how to appropriately deal with frustration is something that behavior management can help with. We've got music therapy. We've got recreational therapy so that we can help teach some of those play skills. We have adult day services and many, many more. So how do you apply for a waiver? Well, you can contact your local Bureau of Developmental Disability Services office. We've got the website there. Or frankly, you can call the ARC of Indiana. We help people sign up every day. You can send us an email, or you can call us at 1-800-382-9100. We'll answer your questions about the waivers. We'll tell you how to fill out that application and help get you on your way. Now, there is a waiting list web portal. So if you're not sure if you've already signed up, you can always check this wait list portal to see if your information is in there, and if it's correct, and if you see an application date. If you don't see an application date on there, then something's gone sideways along the way, and you should call your local Bureau of Developmental Disabilities office to see how to fix that. But you can go to this website to check on your waitlist status. One thing to know is that you will need your loved one, the last 4 digits of your loved one's social security number. That's the one thing that most people have no clue what that is, and they've got to look it up. So you'll need their name, their date of birth, their last 4 digits of their social security number, and that'll get you the information that you need. But you also want to make sure that you keep your address and contact information current so that beads can contact you when you are targeted, meaning that your name has come up on the waiting list. Beads will always send things out by U.S. mail, so you want to make sure that that address is always correct. And you can actually update that information either by calling the Beads office or by correcting it through the waitlist portal. So what can I do for help right now? Well, you can request something called caregiver support. That's essentially respite while you're on the waiting list. But in order to qualify for that caregiver support, you cannot be getting any other type of DARS-related services. So you can't be involved in First Steps, and you can't be involved with vocational rehab in order to get caregiver support. But you can apply for other supports while you wait and possibly continue to use them up until the time you get that waiver. But there are other supports available too. So Vocational Rehabilitation Services is a state agency. Their whole purpose is to help people with disabilities find jobs. And they will actually work with that individual. They will work on career exploration. They will try to figure out what types of things is the individual interested in and try to help them find a job in those areas. Supplemental Security Income is a program through the Social Security Administration. This is to help pay for the basics of life: food, shelter, and heat. This may be available to individuals who are under the age of 18, although unlike Medicaid when you have a waiver, Social Security absolutely looks at family income and family assets. So many children won't qualify, but you might be able to. But of course, once they're 18, they need to have that Social Security disability determination anyway, so you need to apply for SSI at that point. There may be other medical supports that a person may qualify for, things like children's special health care services or maybe specialized medical clinics, and then community programs and natural supports. Those can include faith-based organizations, the YMCA. The parks and the libraries are really some incredibly untapped resources that are out there that do all sorts of things. Self-Advocates of Indiana, Special Olympics, Best Buddies. But one of the things that I will also say is just because a person has a disability doesn't mean that they have to only use disability-related services. So, for example, if you have a loved one who loves to craft or maybe loves to knit, find a group in your community who knits baby blankets for infants in the NICU. If you've got somebody who really likes to build, volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. All sorts of things that don't have to be disability related, but can make a big difference. But the one thing we want you to know is that we're here to help. If you have questions, by all means, call the ARC of Indiana or call Down Syndrome of Indiana, and we will help however we can. If some of the information you received differs from other sources, well, it could be because there's been actual changes, or because the person you're talking to may not be aware of some of the changes. And, you know, we used to joke, the only constant with waivers was wait a few years, it all changes. We're not waiting a few years at this point. We're making changes pretty often. So it's important to stay up to date. And if something doesn't sound right, by all means, call the ARC of Indiana or call Down Syndrome of Indiana so that we can get you the most up-to-date information possible. To stay informed, you can visit us at www.arcind.org. You can sign up for our e-newsletters and our action alerts. That's where we update families on what's happening, especially at the state legislature, as we're passing all sorts of laws that impact individuals with disabilities. You can join the ARC of Indiana on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can listen to our podcast called A View from My Window, which is hosted by an incredibly talented journalist named Michelle Fisher, who happens to be a woman with cerebral palsy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to call the ARC of Indiana at 1-800-382-9100 or to call Down Syndrome of Indiana at 317-925 or call Down Syndrome of Indiana. Thank you.